Welcome to this session here, Strategy and Leadership Theatre. I'm here with Dave Carf, who is the General Secretary of ASLEF, the Train Drivers Union. Dave has been in the role now for just over 6 months, isn't it? And before that, he was a train driver for a good 40 years, wasn't it?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to start, Dave. You drove your final train sort of end of December. I think it was Birmingham New Street into London Euston. Now, coming straight from the cab into the General Secretary's office, what would you say is the biggest disconnect between how senior rail executives see how a railway runs and what you see it from the driver's seat?
I think there's a great feeling amongst those that work on the railway, and particularly those in ASLEF, that there is a massive disconnect between the employer and the train driver, and I think the other grades as well. They don't always understand the decision-making process. Sometimes that process isn't either explained in good terms or sometimes not explained at all of why change is happening. So I think there is disconnect, but as someone who's been on the job 41 years, that's not unique to recent circumstances. I mean, throughout the history of the railway, there's been a feeling like that, certainly in my time, of a disconnect.
Do you think it's got worse over the last few years, or...?
I think it depends where you are in the country and who you work for. I think some operators under the privatised rail system have been better than others, whether that be freight or passenger. But I really think a good relationship between the trade union and the employer is key to a good workforce.
So I guess one of the questions I had was all about, you've driven pretty much everything from freight to, I think you drove Eurostar as well.
North of London, yeah, domestic.
Yeah. And obviously you've done West Coast as well. You know, the day-to-day job of a train driver, though, it's changed quite drastically in those 40 years, I imagine. You know, what do you think has been the biggest change? Is it the modernisation, or do you think it's...
I think the biggest change for train drivers has been safety.
Okay.
I think the job that I started in 1984 was a lot less safe than it is in 2026. I mean, the crashworthiness of rolling stock and the driving cab is second to none. The braking capability of many of the modern rolling stock is really superior. And I think train design, although it's not perfect, the driver's cab is, in a lot of circumstances, is better than it was under the old British rail system. I mean, we've got trains now in driving cabs with air conditioning and that aren't drafty all the time like the old locomotives were. And the amount of equipment in the cab from when I started back in 1985, which was just really a power controller, a straight air brake and a train brake and the fuses and the rest of it. I mean, it's a totally different environment. But safety has been a big improvement for train drivers.
So I guess, how much further can we go with it? You know, are we talking about technological advancements? I mean, for instance, I was out last week to have a look at a new Vectron X at Siemens, and they could remotely start it and stop it. That, to me, is a danger. But where do you see that?
Look,
in terms of technology, how far can we go with it?
I mean, technology used in the right way is a good thing. You know, I mean, human beings can make errors and mistakes, and having that overarching system that stops a collision or a serious incident, then that's a good thing. I mean, no one wants to go out and make a mistake at work. I think, if we're moving towards driverless trains, I mean, that's a question for society, because we're going to end up in a society where we don't need people, aren't we? Because everywhere we look now, we want to get rid of people. So who are going to be the consumers of the future if we've got no one working in many roles, not only train driving?
So I wanted to touch a little bit on the driver age and diversity. You're a huge champion of that.
Yeah.
And that's something that ASLEF has been driving for quite a while. No pun intended there. And it's well documented. We kind of got to a point now where there is a real recruitment issue.
Yeah.
And the age, issue is serious in the industry now. But there are obviously concerns. An 18-year-old, now I know an 18-year-old is not going to drive a train. That's going to be a fair few years. But there are concerns about that. But how vital is it, and how much of a change are we going to see with the age limits?
We want to see, look, when you get to 18, you make a choice in education, don't you? Whether you go into further education or whether you're going to go into the workplace. And by having that gap of not being allowed to become a train driver, then you're missing out on good candidates to be train drivers. The the age isn't an issue. We work in a competence-based industry where you're either competent or you're not competent. Your age is an issue. But some people, when they do criticise the age being low, only by 2 years down to 18. Well, when I was 17, I was on a mainline railway with running lines open on both sides, hooking up, hooking off. Mm-hmm. You know, getting down on signal post telephones. Well, if that wasn't dangerous, then I don't know what is. So I think we're in a good place for 18. For diversity, I think the industry still needs to address that. I think we've got somewhere around 11% of train drivers are women, and obviously, and in the industry as a whole, I think it's only around 20% in the industry are women on the railway. So there's a lot of work still to do.
How do you go about doing that work? How do you raise 11% to 20%? You know, what do you have in place for that?
I mean, there is an opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years with the age profile of train drivers. There's a lot of retirements coming up, so we could encourage more women to come into rail. But I think we have to change a bit of how we approach rostering and the diagramming breaks and stuff like that, because they don't lean themselves in all areas for women to come into rail.
So I guess in that instance, then obviously there'll be a fair few people that will say that it's not very welcoming industry in that regard for women. And also, not necessarily women, but obviously people from a diverse background. The challenge not necessarily getting them through the door once you get them through the door, but it's attracting them in the first place.
It's partly attracting them, but also keeping them in the role. Because we do have women coming to rail who leave the train driving position because for various reasons go into other roles because either the shift work or the diagram of the pattern of work within the company they can't work around with other commitments outside of. So
job. I guess the first 5 years of being a train driver. I know you've recently said about talent pools and those not necessarily being the most effective way of keeping them in an industry. Do we really need to sort of review how a train driver the first 5 years of their career?
Yeah, I think from start to finish we need to advertise in the right way. Where are we advertising for train drivers? Talent pools, as you say, I've mentioned before. I mean, to ask somebody to become a future employee and then leave them in a talent pool for 2 years and tell them we'll let you know when we're ready, I don't think that's a good way to start off a relationship between employer and employee. So that definitely needs to change. There must be a much smoother pathway from the recruitment process right through to the train driver to becoming a train driver.
So do you think it's an operator-led thing in terms of diversity? Do you think it's something to do more to do with ASLEF itself? Who needs to drive this? And as we move into GBR, who's taking the reins with it?
Well, we've been driving this for at least 10 years, if not longer, as a trade union. I mean, we can only recruit who the train operating companies and freight operating companies employ. So the employer needs to take the lead, but we're more than welcome to assist in that process, and along with GBR as well.
So I wanted to actually touch on something a little bit different entirely, on open access. Now, it's probably unsurprising to many. Dave's gone on record stating that you kind of believe that all rail services should be under GBR, and that includes open access. But the most recent passenger rail survey data actually showed that open access operators performed much better than most nationalised operators and some privates as well. So do you think it's because the OA model is just not working, or do you think it's a fundamental political vision that it should be under nationalisation?
It's a political vision, most certainly. I mean, some of the services that are open access now were previously run by British Rail. It's only when we privatised we took those services away as part of the franchise model. But also about fare box extraction, about £250 million a year is taken out of the system by the open access operators. And I'd suggest that whilst they might start at stations that are maybe off of what is currently the main line route, most of the fare box comes from the stations along that route.
And I guess then you look at the model now. If OA is going to stay in GBR, in the GBR world, which it certainly looks like it's going to, do you want to see fundamental reform? So we don't see things like all cats raiding, and we don't see. So we want to see non-mainline routes being taken up by open access for community good rather than for financial gain? Or would you just rather they just be completely taken out of the system?
No, they should be in part of GBR, and GBR should be running those train services. You know, I mean, there's a lot made about open access operators and off the mainline routes, but all those off mainline routes run into London. You know, where's the open access operator serving rural communities? Well, they're not there, are they? Because GBR will serve those rural communities, and GBR should also be taking those services on to run those services on behalf of the public.
So I guess that challenge then would be, I guess the challenge would be then for open access would be to find a way to live within this system, but GBR doesn't seem to have that appetite, you know, to look after routes that open access have at the moment.
Yeah.
Extraction is obviously a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, but if we could remodel it so we had demand-led, would you be up for that? Or
no, we believe in all rail, including freight. There should be a nationalised freight operator as well. We believe that any extraction from the rail system is taking money out of taxpayers' pockets, and it should be left in the rail system.
So, I guess then, you know, we see the challenges obviously on the West Coast Main Line, and you know it from a driver. Yeah. I guess the issue is obviously cherry picking on routes, and one of the issues we've obviously got now is there are cuts to services. Avanti and obviously Southeastern and Thameslink are also cutting services at the moment. So that must be a real concern for you as a leader of the trade union, that the DFT seems to have gone down one route in terms of we're going to cut subsidy, we need to cut subsidy, so we're going to cut services rather than try and raise revenue. Is that a concern for you? That seems to be the direction of travel.
I mean, there's always a danger for us that any service cuts, it's if those trains come back. I mean, I can go back to 1980s when on the southern region loads of services were cut out for a timetable and those services never returned. And that's always going to be concerning. But we're confident that in the future rail will continue to grow. There's demand for rail, and we're confident it will still head in that direction.
And how receptive are GBR to your views in that?
Well, as a trade union, I'm not entirely sure people are always receptive of our views, but they listen to what we say, you know. But I mean, it wasn't that long ago when rail renationalisation wasn't on the agenda, was it?
No.
And we've fought that for 30 years, and here we are with rail renationalisation nearly in the process of coming to fruition.
So I wanted actually to touch on something which it could be a slow move. You know, we could be staring down the barrel of a gun in a few years' time when it comes to harmonisation of contracts. It's going to be a difficult process, isn't it, for harmonising contracts between, you know, open access with private and nationalised operators. You know, there's 16, 17 different contracts out there, all slightly variant. How much of an issue is that? And is it going to be a concern that we're going to see issues with industrial action?
So harmonisation for the 14, for the DFT, the current DFTO talks, which will become GBR, as far as we're concerned, everything remains the same until it's negotiated otherwise. So we've got quite an open mind on it. We believe that every train driver who works for the same company should be on the same terms, conditions and pay. So that will be our principle for those discussions, if those discussions take place. But if there are no discussions, then things stay as they are.
And those discussions haven't happened yet?
No. We're in very early days of informal discussions, really, with DFTO. We have a good relationship. We meet quarterly. We discuss things of mutual concern, and they keep us in the loop a little bit about what's happening in the future.
So, I mean, obviously, you know, you have mainline, you have, you know, certain operators within certain areas, different pays, different terms and conditions, obviously with 7-day working, which I know is something that you want to see instigated. Are you confident the DFT and GBR also want to see that happening? And is that going to be one of the biggest hurdles?
No, I don't think so. Look, the modern railway has to have Sundays part of the working week. It's ridiculous in any shape or form for it not to be there. I'm very confident that in the next months and couple of years, we will see virtually every company will have a 7-day railway 7-day contract.
That's a bold statement.
Oh, look, well, unless government changes its view, then that's what's going to happen.
But I guess you could turn around, you know, and certain operators, you know, they've been operating on a 7-day, you know, overtime schedules on Sundays for a long, long while. Is that are you talking about overcoming institutionalizations and culture changes at these operators, or are you seeing that there's an appetite for them to actually turn to 7-day working?
The thing is, if you want a 7-day railway, you have to have people contracted as part of their normal working week to work Sundays. And if you don't have, if you can't guarantee a service on a Sunday, that will impact on other days of the weekend. Because if you can't guarantee a train on a Sunday, then people won't travel Friday and Saturday. So there's a real gain for everybody in the industry to have Sundays part of a normal working week.
So I want to actually touch on a little bit more about in sort of industrial relations and moving forward into the brave new world of Great British Railways. And you were a core part of the team that kind of brought an end to the most recent I think it was 2 years nearly it was, national pay dispute. And kind of away from that, obviously the fire's died down with that a little bit. But is there learnings to take away from that to take into the new world? And kind of how does the model of sort of industrial relationships look under your leadership? ASLEF's industrial relations position has been very constant for a large number of years, so that will never change with a different general secretary, I don't think. But the lessons learned from the national dispute, I think, are certainly for us. I think we learned how to run a national dispute because we hadn't had one since 1982, and we learned a lot of lessons from that along the way, and we've sort of learnt a few things ourselves in how to run a national dispute. But I think from the employers' side, and particularly the political side, that politicians interfering in industrial relations isn't a good thing. The employers need to be able to sit down and negotiate with the people that represent their workforce and to reach a resolution. And the way that was designed through RDG was designed not to resolve an industrial dispute. They tried to bring in minimum service levels, which were probably the worst drafted legislation I think we've ever seen in the rail industry, and that even surpasses rail privatisation. As well, that legislation, because ill thought through, was never going to work. The industry didn't have an appetite for it either. I don't think the 14 companies. So we've learnt a little bit from that. But I think the important thing is that you allow the people that run the industry to negotiate settlements to disputes and not have political interference. So one of the issues that is brewing at the moment is obviously on East West Rail, and I won't go into too much of that at the moment because I'm sure conversations are ongoing. You've obviously ASLEF has been involved in past disputes when it's come to DOO, driver operated only. Obviously Southern Rail, that was a fair few years ago now, and compromises were reached then. When we come to this, what's the red line for ASLEF? If compromises have to be met, what is the red line?
Our policy is quite clear. It's the second safety critical person on every train. That is the policy of the trade union, and that's where we are. But we can't start talking about East West Rail until the trade union that represents the on-board people has concluded their discussions. And I'm not even entirely sure those discussions have even started. But what I will say about East West Rail, if you were going to design a new route, a new line of route, you would never have designed it in the way it's been designed from a train crew perspective. You wouldn't, if you've got the depot at Bletchley, that's a Chiltern depot, where you've got a West Midlands Trains depot. The trains are from West Midlands Trains, but yet we use drivers from Chiltern who were originally based at Banbury, who then decided you were going to make redundant to move them to Bletchley. That's a political way of running a railway. And that's why you need the industry to run the railway, not the politicians.
And is that byproduct of them not listening to you, not being involved in the planning? Well, how does this situation like this come about?
Well, first and foremost, it goes back. I think Chris Grayling was the Secretary of State for Transport at the time, so the blame starts there. But it was just about an anti rail agenda. I think that they thought the private industry could do it better. I think Network Rail ended up doing more of the infrastructure work than actually the private operators did. But if you're going to run a railway, let the operational experts in the industry sit down and work it out, not do it by political dogma.
So, obviously, when they all sit down and RMT has worked it out with Chiltern, whenever that may well be, and it then comes to your turn, the red lines are, we need a second safety critical person on board. There is no real compromise there.
Well, it's the policy of the trade union.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't know what you expect me to say as the general secretary of a trade union and say, well, actually, we don't really mean our policy. It's the policy of the trade union. And East West Rail isn't just about the bit between Oxford and Bletchley. It's the continuation into Milton Keynes, down to Bedford and beyond to Cambridge. So it's a bigger picture than just that part of the line as well.
So I've just got one more couple of questions before we hit to Q&A. I just wanted again, actually, to talk a little bit about your fight to actually get proper brakes.
Toilet breaks.
Toilet breaks for drivers. It seems quite absurd in 2026, doesn't it? You know, it's quite wild, isn't it? Yeah. How bad of an issue is it? And how close are we going to get it resolved?
So, how bad of an issue is it? So, we launched this in 2024, November 19th, 2024, World Toilet Day. And prior to the launch, we did a survey of our members. We've got 3,000 responses. And the items used by train drivers, or the way train drivers address not having access to a toilet, is varied. Lunchboxes, hard hats, drivers taking towels to work to put on seats, taking a change of clothes to work. Lucozade bottles, obviously, we're a very male-dominated industry, so the Lucozade bottles is another one. And this isn't just for train drivers in ASLEF. I mean, one of the industry meetings we went to, which was actually chaired by the ORR, the on-track machine representative there said they don't even get a break in a 12-hour shift, and that is the Network Rail contract. So that's quite probably even more serious than the issues we have within ASLEF, but it is a serious issue for us. Health implications are involved with that. Toxic shock, prostate issues, and it's just, as you say, in 2026, I've been on the railway 41 years, it's probably got worse in 41 years than it's improved, and we are resolute that we will push this to the end. Industry, at one point, we're all on board with it, and then all of a sudden there's a change of heart for whatever reason, we don't know, but it's not going away. We want toilet breaks for our drivers after no more than 4 hours on duty. And the irony is, prior to doing this job, I did a lot of industry meetings, whether it be at RSSB or with Network Rail, and after 2 hours, you'd have a comfort break. The train driver can go 6 hours without having a comfort break.
And how close are we to getting it resolved?
We are probably further away now than we were 12 months ago, but we are not giving up on it. We're looking for political support as well. We'll be having those conversations, and World Toilet Day this year, November the 19th. Again, if we don't have a pathway to change, then we'll have to force that pathway.
So, Q&A. Questions from the floor?
Hi, so I am part of the onboard staff for Southern, and I was just picking up on what you were saying, how it's ASLEF's sort of stance that there's a second safety critical person on board. Now, as onboard staff, we're actually deemed non-safety critical and trains can run entirely without an onboard supervisor. We're also expected to lead an evacuation should the driver be incapacitated, but we're not personal track safety trained or have no route knowledge. I'm just wondering what your opinions are on that. Obviously, I know I'm represented by RMT, but I'm wondering what your opinion is on that as we're considered non-safety critical, and a lot of the time trains, especially in disruption, are running entirely without a second person on board at all.
So our view is it should be a second safety critical person, and hopefully, and one of the things about when we talk about customer satisfaction, I've never heard a customer or a survey say where people don't want a second person on the train. If you look at what's happening in society, it's probably more important now than it's ever been to have a second person on the train going up and down who should be safety critical, and we will just keep pushing for that as a trade union, as I know the RMT do. And every opportunity, if there's an opportunity to increase the number of people on board a train, then that's what we'll be doing.
Any more? Yeah. This gentleman at the front.
Yes, Mr. Calf is quite right about the open access, because they are all operations to and from London, where people can make some money and where they can compete with the mainline railway, the franchise line, and that's why we've got them. When anybody looks at doing one on a local route, it never really seems to come off. And I'm going to challenge Hull Trains, who are very keen to tell you how good their service is, but it's only to London. I said, what about a service to York, in order to connect to the north.
Yeah.
And they're not interested in a local service, even from Hull. So I think it shows that under the present regime, we'll just go on getting these rather few open access trains, and they will never be relevant to the great majority of people's journeys and the great majority of railways.
And that's very true. And I think, but also I think it just replicates perhaps where our system's been politically and industry-wide, that's been London-centric, and the north of England and other areas have lost out on rail investment, true rail investment for connectivity.
So any more questions, guys? Or so there's actually just one more. I got for you, Dave. Is you've 6 months in the role now, and then you've obviously got a term, and then you're hopefully another term after that, if you choose, obviously.
Yeah. Not getting any younger.
In that time, what would success look like for you? For the railway, do you have targets in mind and things you want to achieve in this time?
So I think the targets for me is to keep the membership growing. I mean, when I was first involved in the executive 20 years ago, we were somewhere around 16,000 members. We're up to 23,000 now. So to keep the membership growing, to keep improving terms and conditions and pay for train drivers is important, but also that we work with the industry to grow the industry. But to grow revenue, we don't have a problem with growing revenue in the industry. We want more trains. We believe in the train service. We're not just sat on the front of the train worrying about when the next payday is. We believe in the system. We believe in the train service. Most of our members, I mean, I've done 41 years. Once you come into the job, very few people leave, and they have a belief in the job and a belief in the system and railways. We want to see railways grow.
And do you think what you've seen of the railways bill so far and what you've heard from the DFT and GBR, and Nascent GBR, should we say, do you have confidence that this phase of nationalisation will deliver more trains, drive down subsidies, 12.5 billion at the moment, which is quite a lot. It's very a lot. Do you have the confidence that it will?
I'm confident.
Succeed?
I'm confident that it's going in a better direction than it was under 30 years of privatisation, most definitely. And I think there's the political will there at the minute to put GBR in, and hopefully they'll let GBR have a bit of a freer hand to run the railways and run the railways in the right way.
Wonderful. Dave, thank you very much.
Cheers, Richard. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.